All right, thanks for everybody for coming to this session. First of all, I just want to say this is my first NACIS, and everybody here has been incredibly welcoming. I've met a bunch of really great people, and I'll be here again and again. So I'm going to talk today about some software that we have home built over the years at the American Geographical Society Library, where I started as a student and now serve as the geospatial information specialist. So in addition to our data services and classroom instruction and things like that, I've taken on this pet project to bring this Geodex system that we use into the 21st century. And I want to talk today a little bit about making this process collaborative so we can work together to help track down maps in large series and work together as map libraries across the country and beyond. So a lot of people here make maps. I like to joke that this is making maps of maps. So our collection has over 500,000 paper maps, and so finding them often involves using index maps. A lot of times those are just maps on top of the pile in the drawer in the first file. And so we use these index maps to keep track of what we have, and sometimes to keep track of additional information about individual sheets. So the title, and whether it's published by, sometimes they're published by different publishers in different languages. There's new editions, things like that. So to anyone who's either worked or researched in a map library, this is probably a pretty familiar sight. So this is just one example that we pulled from the drawer at the AGS library, showing the index map for our France to 1 to 50,000 scale. Keep in mind that this map on the left is no bigger than a sheet of printer paper. So while some index maps are pretty large and there's lots of room to write, this one would probably require most of us to use a magnifying glass to really get any kind of usable detail off of it. In this particular example, the red lines are showing something that we do have at the AGS library. And the blue line is showing things that include a military grid and that we have at the AGS library. So, I mean, this system is tried and true. It works fine. It's a good way to get in there and figure out what we have and don't have. But there's also a lot of potential with something like this to make it a little more useful, include more information. One thing that we could do, and one thing a lot of institutions do, is scan this, put this online, include it as part of the set level metadata, and that's very helpful. It allows a user to get on there and get an idea of what might be available and some more information about the set. But it can be taken a step further. So. In 1988, our former curator, Chris Baruth, created some software called Geodex, so short for Geographic Indexing System for Map Series. It was a command line interface. It was 1988, but that was fine. What it allowed us to do was add new records to these series indexes very quickly. So, a lot of these map series, they share a publisher, they share a style, and they might even share extents and things. A lot of times, the only thing that's changing is the title, some kind of maybe unique ID, and then the geographic extent. So if you can just copy everything else over and change only what needs to be changed, it made this process really, really quick. So one thing that really, made this software special was that it allowed a librarian at the AGS library to very quickly identify a map sheet in a series by searching by latitude and longitude coordinates. So a very common example would be a genealogist looking up some place name in a gazetteer, and that place might not exist anymore, or it might have a new name. And all we know about it is its latitude and longitude coordinates. And in Geodex, we could go in and enter in that latitude and longitude coordinate and get back results on what maps that we had that covered that area. And that was a pretty big deal, especially at that time. It also had other really interesting functionality. One that I definitely want to draw attention to is the functionality to allow reconciling files from other collections. So the idea was that other map libraries would purchase this software, and they did. I have records of at least 30 other collections purchasing this software. And the idea was that they would buy the software and buy our files that showed our indexes that we've created. They would create their own indexes and then reconcile those files and then send them back. And there was a newsletter system that facilitated this, and floppy disks were mailed around. And I can't really tell, I haven't dug too deep into it, and if anybody has any insight on this, I'd love to hear it. But it's really unclear how long that went on. It kind of seems like we were the ones that ended up chugging along to this day. So when I started at the AGS library in 2013 as a graduate student, we were still using the original Geodex in DOSBox. I actually pulled this screenshot from my computer using DOSBox. But today, even, this is as far as I can get. I can't get past the main menu. It's too complicated, and it's just too out of date to really get it to work. So when it was still working, and we had the last Windows XP computers on campus, we were able to make one last extract of the data that had been entered into the system. So two things here. That although it was distributed, it was never really totally realized that original idea that this would be a collaborative indexing software. And like I said, we were able to get that last export out. Some previous interns before me had made all kinds of different tools. I think they could see that this software wasn't going to live on in this format forever. So they had made tools to extract ASCII files out of the database, and even had written some scripts to clean it up a little bit, put it into Access databases, and make the information a little more usable. They'd started to play around with making web maps for GIS, or maps, data files for GIS, and then even some very early web mapping projects. So a lot of this work was kind of building towards this. So I ended up making one kind of final export out of Geodex and into an Access database, calculated some bounding boxes and cleaned up the data a little bit to get rid of some artifacts. One really critical artifact was that series were typically stored on a single disk. So you would have one floppy disk for your France 1 to 50,000. You'd have another floppy disk for your NOAA nautical charts. And then when we switched over to a hard drive system, rather than different disks, each series was a different file. In the geodatabase architecture that I finally designed, each of those files represents a series. And in the geodatabase architecture, I made it a different subtype. So things like domains and default values could be assigned to series, so that as we added new maps, similar to the old system where you would copy from an existing record, you could set up defaults for series, and that was very useful. So thus, Geodex 2.0 was born, and it's a two-sided thing. So the database part of it is just a file, SDE geodatabase that sits on our campus ArcGIS server. It's pretty standard. It's nothing special. It's about 350,000 features. as one feature class, like I said, with various subtypes. And then the backend part of it, so for our use, for entering in new records, I started to realize that a lot of this functionality, 5 minutes, sorry? A lot of this functionality was, kind of standard GIS stuff, querying tables and things like that. So I wanted to use it in ArcMap. So, but there were some special tools that I wanted to specifically design for doing these special tasks related to Geodex. So a tool for loading data into the map, a tool for viewing an individual set and identifying single sheets, a tool for editing records, a tool for editing the spatial extents, and a tool for reconciling holdings with the dream that someday somebody else would be doing this too. And then the other side is a public-facing web map. This was designed by one of our former interns, Ben Schrader. And now we use this to search the Geodex system in-house, but it's also out there on our website, so anybody can use it to search. I learned all the toolbar in ArcMap. I have to shout out to Hussein Nasser and his really awesome YouTube channel, iGeometry. He's a product engineer for Esri now. This is just a quick peek of the back end. So this is what you see in ArcMap when you're entering records. Some basic functionality, viewing an individual series. And then this is just like one of the form examples of entering in the bounding box extents. It's not pretty, I know that, but it gets the job done. And you can enter things pretty rapidly. The idea is that you copy the most similar record and then change what needs to be changed. And this is a view of the web map interface. So you basically zoom to an area and search. You can set up some traditional facets and things, dates, series titles, publishers, and things like that. But then it pulls this metadata too. So the collaborative part of this, there are some other projects where people are trying to collaborate on creating index maps. So Chris Theory at the Colorado School of Mines, he manages this clearinghouse of indexes to paper map sets. They use ArcGIS Online. They create fishnets and then add their index information into here. And then they're linking out to items in their digital collections. Something newer that I think has a lot of potential for making these collaborations possible and most importantly interoperable is this coming out, Open Index Maps. It came out of the 2017 Geo for LibCamp, and people have been talking about it a little bit. It's basically a GeoJSON format for individual series. Basically just taking that same idea, that same architecture, series as a feature class. Each individual sheet has some metadata. Stanford Libraries is using this. It makes for a really cool interface on a web map where you can zoom around these feature classes, click on these individual sheets, and link out to their items in their digital collection. I'd say one thing is it definitely has a strong focus on accessing those materials as digitized maps on the website. A lot of our large series have not been scanned. So although I think they created this platform with the idea of accessing that web content, I also think it would be very helpful for accessing physical collections, not only for access, but also for management. So I might be able to share a file with another library, find out what they have that we're missing and vice versa, and be able to collaborate on that. This is still in development, but I think it's the answer, and I'm excited for it. So moving forward, real quick, we need to decide on what attributes are most important. So like I said, some of the newer projects are really focusing on web map access, but there's a lot of other details that Geodex collected that other map libraries might not be. Publisher type of maps, even prime meridian, things like that. Beyond just large series, especially series that are not kind of that fishnet style, things that have various scales, like nautical charts that vary wildly in scales. And so we want to be able to incorporate those too, and Geodex handles those really well. Keeping them in one central database or just having them able to be shared. I'm a huge proponent of having one kind of union list of all these series so we can see which libraries have what. Right now, Geodex is very much kind of hard-coded for our use. It's really focused on our collection, but I think with more collaborators, it could really be expanded pretty far beyond that. And I'd love to get some collaborators who are interested in doing this. And a shameless plug for my adorable cat, who I miss very much, Sputnik. All right, thank you. That's all I've got today. Happy to take questions.